Ichigo vs Kenpachi. This is for sure one of the best throwdowns in the Soul Society and arguably even in all of Bleach. But why is that? Well, let me spit real quick. I mean spit facts, not actually spit. That's kind of nasty. Ichigo by this point just got done fighting Renji and Ikkaku after having a crazy training arc. Ichigo by this point hasn't fought a really powerful captain yet, like yeah, Renji is kinda strong, but granted he is very arrogant and isn't really refined as a fighter in my opinion at least. And as for Ikkaku, he's actually led by Kenpachi himself. So this fight is not only set up perfectly to happen, but just the introduction of Kenpachi goes to show that Ichigo might be in over his head. Just Kenpachi's raw aura was stabbing Ichigo through the chest, and we see Kenpachi noting Ichigo's feats, and instead of being intimidated, he's excited. This is because Kenpachi himself is bloodlust for battle and the idea of someone actually pressing him, and because of this, he lets Ichigo get a free hit in. And we see this man Ichigo not even being able to pierce his skin due to his sheer Ryatsu. There are a lot of moments where the main villain kind of just gives some shock value for the viewer because they're just slamming Ichigo, but no one does it better than Kenpachi in my opinion. Kenpachi is genuinely disappointed that this is all Ichigo had to offer and proceeded to make this man actually run away from the battle. Ichigo, the dude who runs headfirst into battle to protect his friends, is now being consumed by the sheer intensity of Kenpachi. He would try to run away, but Kenpachi isn't having it, and Ichigo himself is just trying to snap himself out of this state. For the first time, our protagonist is actually consumed with fear, the fear of not being able to overcome his obstacle. The sheer instinct of Kenpachi is consuming him, however, Ichigo is reminded of Chad, who, mind you, is fighting someone much more powerful than him as well, but is still clinging on to life and isn't giving up. Obviously, this isn't an analysis on Chad, but this fight does come into play with Ichigo snapping out of this state of shock. He realizes that the people around him are fighting just as hard as him and not giving up, and he himself can't afford to be scared. This is when Ichigo calms himself down and goes on to actually cut Kenpachi. Ichigo believed he could have done this in the first place, and we know that he was just straight up shaking against him, meaning he was nerfed. And it's not like Kenpachi here was going all out anyway. Kenpachi, instead of being disappointed with Ichigo, would go on to start getting excited again, thrilled that Ichigo is living up to his hype. But as soon as Ichigo begins to get overconfident, thinking that because Kenpachi is using his Zanpakuto, he won't get any stronger. But this is when Kenpachi gets disappointed, since he thought Ichigo was beginning to fight with his killer instinct. He would go on to, instead of spiritually stab Ichigo through the chest like how he did in the beginning of the fight, he would literally stab him through the chest this time. The first time he initially encounters Kenpachi, it's more of a mental game. However, after recovering from this and actually begins to attempt to fight Kenpachi, instead of being mentally held back, he would actually just be outright overpowered. Ichigo falls, but instead of accepting defeat, he would go on to continue the fight despite literally dying on the floor. And this is when Zangetsu appears and manages to clutch up for Ichigo, allowing him to achieve his killer instinct. You can find this to be a typical MC power-up, but to me this is actual character growth for Ichigo, and this battle is a big staple in showing the maturity of Ichigo over the course of the series. And we also know that after this encounter with Zangetsu, we know that Ichigo morally would spiral down. The more and more he uses that power, the less righteous Ichigo becomes. And that spiral sort of begins with this battle here. Anyways, thanks to Zangetsu, Ichigo is able to combat Kenpachi and actually overpower him. However, despite this, we see Kenpachi just getting excited from the thought of this. And he would begin to say how he's just getting started. Kenpachi throughout the whole time has been trying to get the best fight out of Ichigo due to him just loving fighting as a whole, even if that means literally holding himself back for the sake of having a good fight. Meanwhile, Ichigo is just only wanting to get stronger in order to protect everybody else, rejecting his actual love for fighting. However, we see over the course of the fight, when Kenny actually sees Ichigo using his killer instinct, he's getting more and more riled up, forcing him to remove his eye patch, which funny enough holds his power back. Ichigo and Kenpachi decide to end it all in one final clash with all their power, and instead of one overpowering the other in some dumb cliche, the two actually stab each other and bring each other down, with Ichigo going down first, but Kenny declaring Ichigo the winner.
てめえの勝ちだ、バカ野郎。
The end of the fight technically ends here, but it's revealed that Kenny's accomplice lets him live, and she implies that Kenny genuinely had a great time fighting Ichigo. And for the first time, he finally believes he can become stronger. We see how Kenpachi not only impacted Ichigo and made him get over his fears, but Ichigo impacted Kenpachi himself, showing him that there's always more room to improve. And to me, I think this is where I thought Bleach was really starting to pick up, and it actually does help Ichigo in the long run. And like how I said, when Ichigo's hollow begins to literally eat him from the inside, making him morally descend, we see Kenpachi actually try and be that light of hope for Ichigo, trying to snap him out of it. And then years after this, just as Kenny is about to fall after giving everything he had to win, being in a position similar to Ichigo beforehand, it is now Ichigo who returns him the favor and does the saving. This shit goes hard, man.
That's what I'm talking about! That's why he's the MVP! That's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT!